Good morning, bienvenue ici au Canada. Absolutely, I want to add my welcome to everybody here. Over 3,000 people having a chance to come here to IAC, to 65. Mais pour moi, c'est plus important d'être ici au Canada, to come here to Canada, and to, if you guys can put up that first slide for me, that'd be great, please. To back up one. To have a chance to come here to Canada, to here on the shores of Lake Ontario, and to Toronto. There's been some really interesting conversation on the stage so far this morning, and some great entertainment. Ian, I thought it was very interesting to pull through history to some of the things that have led to great things happening. And we are really at an interesting time in history. And there's influence and capability and expertise and enthusiasm in this room that can have that sort of influence in the future as well. I've been one of the extremely fortunate human beings who's had a chance to ride both of these rocket ships. It's an amazing new capability for us as a species, not to be in two dimensions, but to start to understand all the possibilities that exist in the third. And it's, no matter which one of those you get into, it's an amazing ride. It only takes 8 or 9 minutes, about as long as I'm going to talk. But the power of it, the improbability of it, the brute force ramming up through the atmosphere, the huge vibration crushing you and squishing you and shaking you in your seat as we hurl our way up to get above the atmosphere and then ride those rockets for the last few minutes as they get you faster and faster and faster until eventually the engines shut off and you're weightless in space. On my last flight, I was up in space for 5 months, and by contrast, 5 months on board the space station in the background, 50% of the risk of the entire flight, 50%, half of the things that could kill us were in the first 9 minutes, riding these two rocket ships. It is hard to do what we do. It's really right on the edge of our capability to do it safely and reliably and repeatedly. So why do it? Why explore? Why take these risks? And if you look historically, exploration has always been difficult and challenging at the edge of our technology, the edge of our finance, and the edge of our ability to accept risk. In Canada's history, trying to find a way from Europe to the Orient without going all the way around South America or South Africa, trying to find a route through the Northwest Passage 160, 170 years ago, ships under Franklin tried to find a way through Canada's north. And they got trapped in the ice. They had lots of provisions on board. But then they got trapped in the ice for a second winter with their whole crew on board. And people were getting sick and dying. And finally they got trapped in the ice a third winter. They were unsuccessful in their exploration. And we lost the ships. We had no idea where they were until about a month ago when we found one of Franklin's ships on the bottom of the ocean up in northern Canada. And the people that had been on board that ship, their bodies preserved in a permafrost still. And finding out that what had killed them was not understanding all of the risks involved. They were killed by poor nutrition, scurvy, even lead poisoning from the cans their food were stored in and the water purification systems they had on their ships. Early exploration is complex and difficult, so why do it? But it's our nature. It is absolutely our history. For the first, however you want to measure who we are, for our first 1,000,000 years or so, we stayed in that little cloudy patch of Africa. But about 50, maybe 70,000 years ago, depending which data you look at, for the very first time, we started to leave the place of our birth, our first explorers. But people talk about space exploration like it's something different or magical or sacrosanct. But it follows the exact same pattern that we have always followed. We live somewhere for a while until we use up the local resources, or there are too many of us, or a faction of us wants to see what else is out there. And we send out a probe
And it might be, back then, it would have been your 16-year-old son, and say, walk 4 days that direction, see what's over there, over a couple of hills, see if it's livable, come back and report what's out there. And you get that report back. If it looks like that's a place that might sustain human life, then we start to move there. And with that simple human urge, that's how we spread over the whole surface of the planet over 50 or 60,000 years. That got us through all the landmasses. And technology got better, so we could start to sail and start to populate the islands. 100 years ago is when we first went to Antarctica. And we could just barely get there. Shackleton and his crew went down, got trapped in the ice, and through some amazing leadership and heroics managed to survive. Failed pretty much as an exploration mission, but the early stages are complex. But now, 100 years later, thousands of people go to Antarctica every year, and almost 100 people live at the South Pole. And by using that platform, that perspective, we're learning about the history of our planet like we've never seen it before, and we're using that as an observatory to study the universe and understand it in a way that we've never been able to before. And that same process has gone into the vertical over the last 50, 60 years, since Sputnik. And it is difficult. It's complex technologically. It's complex politically and financially. But at the same time, we're doing it. We've built this first outpost, not just as one country, but the group of us. People from all around the world. 15 nations that have had lots to disagree on and still have serious international issues with each other, still at the same time have a common enemy of complexity and cost, and a common purpose of the fundamental necessity to explore, but also the fundamental desire to understand everything that lies beyond our atmosphere. And the things it shows us are revelationary. To go around the world 16 times a day. I've been around the world almost 2,600 times, and you see the world so differently when you get to know it that well. The beauty of the outback, or you can see some of the borders where people have different irrigation policies, like the one between Israel and Egypt, or the gorgeousness of the incredibly dry, empty quarter, and the way the sand dunes have evolved there, or the amount of information that's in this image of San Francisco. The discontinuities in the water, and the Golden Gate, and the San Andreas Fault, and you can just stare at the world and learn so much about our culture and our history and our geology. This looks like a rock chip under a microscope slide, but it's just the blasted, clear rock that exists south of the Sahara. Or the huge metropolitan center of New York, caught in the dawn with the shadows of the tall buildings on the Hudson. It is an amazing way to understand our planet. And if we want to make good decisions, we have to think at a planetary level. And a lot of that responsibility lies with us, because it is so easy on an electoral cycle or on a financial cycle to just think about the next major threat and not to look globally and see how it all fits together subtly as a planet. And the space station has been a terrific example for everybody around the world. It's an amazing laboratory running hundreds of experiments, everything from collecting the stuff of the universe to try and understand what the universe is fundamentally made of, to the hundreds of experiments that we take advantage of weightlessness inside to be able to test things that are impossible to test on the surface of the world. Nanotechnology experiments and flame experiments, and looking at how the human body lives within weightlessness so that we don't repeat the problems that faced Franklin and his crew when we decide it's time to stop sailing around within sight of shore and launch into the radiation and unforgiving environment that we need to go into as we sail further. Try not to repeat the mistakes of the past, challenging our industries, and challenging our space agencies, and challenging the people across our countries to rise to the challenge of exploring the rest of the universe. But the space station is more than that, and it's something we don't talk about too much. Early probes are very much science-oriented, and they should be. But when you start moving somewhere, when you start living permanently, like we've been on the station for almost 14 years, it becomes cultural. It becomes part of what humanity does. And the reflected culture back from living on the space station changes what its purpose can be. This is an extension of who we are. This gives us a different understanding of our world and our place in it, and the universe and our place in it. And the impact that that has temporarily and permanently, maybe the most important part of it. Somebody sent me this picture of their daughter, and they said she watched that Bowie cover that I did over and over and over again, standing there in her leopard skin leotards. But to me, it's such a hopeful picture. What does she consider to be normal? What opportunities does she see for her that didn't exist when any of us were kids? What is part of the fabric of what people do? For my country, Canadians command spaceships. But all the new space agencies around the world and the new opportunities that exist, and what we can do if we cooperate together. The science is important. The exploration is important. The engineering we're doing on the station to learn how to build spaceships better, that's important. But the inspiration of the young folks that are throughout all of our different countries, that's the most important thing. And if you give them a challenge, they will rise to it. And if you don't, they will not. And they will go somewhere else, or they won't realize the potential, which is the worst thing of all. And where to next? We're sailing around the world, figuring out all of the problems we can solve, and eventually we'll be stepping further. And the announcements within the last few weeks, the great success of the Indian Space Agency around Mars, the Charlie Bolden's organization's discussion and decisions recently are terrific. They bode really well. It's very lucky timing for the IAC with all of the great recent successes and opportunities that come from them, not just for the people named, but for everybody associated with the space business around the world as the universe beckons to us. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming to IAC 65, for coming to Canada, for being here in Toronto. Take advantage of it. If you see somebody that you don't know, introduce yourself. Share ideas. This is a rare gathering of people with all different backgrounds and an opportunity that shouldn't be missed. Thank you very much.